Section point 6, Polynomials and Factoring. A polynomial is a collection of terms involving variables raised to non-negative integer powers and real coefficients. So negative 3x to the fourth minus 5x seventh plus 2 meets all of those requirements. However, x to the negative 1, well, we've got a non-negative power, and x to the 1/2 is the same thing as square root of x. So we've got a non-integer power. So there were two things that went wrong in that example. That is not a polynomial. The add, subtract, multiply, divide, I'm going to leave that for you. We're not going to actually divide here. We're just going to add, subtract, and multiply. On number 2, make sure that you distribute the negative. On number 4, make sure that you distribute the negative x to all pieces in the third polynomial over there, all three pieces, and make sure that you distribute the 3 to all three pieces in that second parentheses. So we're now going to move on to factoring monomials, which is just two terms. So we want to factor out the greatest common factor or the negative of it, what's ever going to get us fully factored. So in 5, we noticed that we had a negative 5 in common, so we factored that out, and that left us with 5x squared plus y. Now that is fully factored because the 5x squared plus y only has a 1 in common now. But if you had pulled out a 5, you would have negative 5x squared minus y. And so those two terms in parentheses have a negative 1 in common. So let's see with number 6 what happens. 14x squared y minus 21y. Well, the 14 and the 21 both have a 7 in common, and x squared y and y have a y in common. So 14 divided by 7 is 2. We have x squared. Y divided by y is 1. 21 divided by 7 is 3. And y divided by y is 1. So this factors into 7y times 2x cubed minus 3. And we could FOIL that back or distribute that back, and we would see that we get the same thing. So to factor trinomials, we're factoring 3 terms. Now there are lots of ways to do that. We are going to factor by grouping. So that just means that we are going to take the two numbers that multiply to give us negative 24, which is A times C. And we want those same two numbers to give us positive 5, which is our B. So there's no common denominator, or common factor, I guess I should say, between those three terms. So that's what we're able to go ahead and do with this. So looking at this, I can see that 8 and negative 3 are the two numbers that would satisfy this. So we're going to factor by grouping. So the 6x squared comes down. We're going to split 5x into two terms. So positive 8x minus 3x, because we said 8 minus 3 is 5. And then we're going to bring the negative 4 down. So now we look at the first two terms and we pull out what they have in common. So 6 and 8 both have a 2 in common, And they have an x in common because we have x squared and x. So that leaves me with 3x plus 4. Now, in the second two, I'm either going to pull out what they have in common or the negative of that. So I want to have the parentheses 3x plus 4. To do that, I need to pull out a negative 1 because that would leave me with 3x plus 4. So from here, I can see that 3x plus 4 is a common factor of each term. So I'm going to pull out 3x plus 4, and I see that I'm left with 2x minus 1. So that is the second factor. Now you could FOIL that out, and you would see that that's exactly what you would get. Looking at number 8, we need two numbers that multiply to give us 12 times 21 because there was no common factor for us to pull out. So that's negative 252. And we want them to add to give us 19. So we're multiplying to get A times C. We're adding to get B. So the numbers that works with that are 28 and negative 9. So we've got 12y squared. We're going to split positive 19 into positive 28y minus 9y minus 21. So we've just used the 28 and the minus 9 to split 19y. So now 12y squared and 28y, well, those both have a 4y in common. So if I factor out a 4y, I'm left with 3y plus 7. And now I want to factor out either the greatest common denominator or the negative of that so that I can get the same parentheses. So we're going to factor out a negative 3 because that's going to leave me with a positive 3y and a positive 7. So we can see that 3y plus 7 is a common factor in both. So we're going to bring that out. So 3y plus 7. And then notice I've got 4y minus 3 left. So 4y minus 3 is the other factor. And I've done a third one for you. So now we're going to focus on when A is just 1. So when A is just 1, I've got 1 times 21, which is 21, and I'm adding to be negative 10. So if I'm adding to be negative 10, multiplying to be 21, well, the only way to do that would be to have negative 3 and negative 7. Now, when A is 1, there is a shortcut we can use. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to put an x in front of both of those numbers. So x minus 3 and x minus 7, and that's going to be our factors. So this is a shortcut when A equals 1. That's the only time we can use it. You could also do this by grouping. So tx squared minus 6t minus 27. 1 times negative 27 is negative 27. We're going to add to be negative 6. So looking at that, we're going to need negative 9 and positive 3. And since our a is 1, we can use the shortcut. So we're just going to put a t in front of those. So t minus 9, and then we have a positive 3, so t plus 3. And if we were to FOIL that out, we would get t squared minus or plus 3t minus 9t minus 27, and that's equal to negative 6t in the middle. So we would say that's what we have. And there's a third one there that's already worked out. Difference of perfect squares. That just means that your first term and your last term are perfect squares and there's a minus sign between. So what we do is we take the square root of each of those terms, and because there's a minus sign, we're going to have a plus sign between one set and a minus sign between one set. So for example, if you notice number 13, 18 minus y squared, 81 square root 9. So we have 9 in front. We have plus minus, and the square root of y squared is y. So we get 9 plus y, 9 minus y. In 14, there's 49x squared minus 64. So 49, the square root of that is 7. Square root of x is x. Square root of 64 is 8. So we have 7x plus 8 times 7x minus 8. Now, if you learn to factor another way, feel free to do that method instead. This is just the way I factor. As long as your method works every time, feel free to do so. Let me know if you have questions.